102.2 Auckland. The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Phil Goff.
Yes, let's talk politics with the leader of the Labour Party. It is Phil Goff. Good morning to you, Phil.
Yeah, good morning, Wammo.
Just come back from China. I bet you wish you'd stayed away another couple of weeks.
Oh, no, I'm always glad to be back. The only problem is it's still about 5 o'clock in the morning Chinese time, and I might still be on that time frame. A great trip to China, actually. It was pretty much a whirlwind trip, a week, largely working on trade issues, a real chance to meet some of the top new leadership of the Chinese government, and that was important, and a chance to follow up on the free trade agreement that I signed in China just 2 years ago. Also a chance to see the Expo, and I'm really pleased. I worked hard to get the site we did for Expo, and a great pavilion, and an estimated 7 million people that will go through it over the next 5 months. Meanwhile,
though, a whirlwind of trouble here in New Zealand with MPs' expenses. Some embarrassing revelations as well, particularly with Shane Jones watching the pornographic films. You will obviously be making some changes to the Shadow Cabinet lineup.
I'll be having a press conference at noon today where I'll announce my response to wrongful use of credit cards. Let me say this in respect to Shane's case. Look, I make no judgment about what people do in the privacy of their rooms. That's not my business. It's not relevant to me, and it ought not to be relevant in terms of a minister's performance of his or her duties. What I am worried about is the proper expenditure of ministerial credit cards. And while that money was paid back, and it was paid back long before the issues became public, it is a question of judgment, and there will be sanctions that will follow for those that have wrongfully used their credit card. I've got to say I can't find evidence of dishonest intent there, but carelessness and poor judgment. There must also be sanctions for that. Maybe not dishonesty, but perhaps some extravagance, maybe a culture of some sort of extravagance or entitlement when it comes to some of the more seasoned MPs? Well, I think it's really important to guard against that culture of entitlement. It can happen, and the longer you're there, the more likely it is to happen. And in fact, it didn't take very long at all when you consider some of the cases of new ministers. Phil Heatley was able to put $1,400 worth of private holiday travel that he didn't repay until he was caught out. Yes, but are you regretting hassling John Key so much about his treatment of Phil Heatley and, in fact, reinstating Phil Heatley? No, not at all. There has to be one rule that applies to both sides of Parliament. What Phil Heatley did was quite wrong in two instances. One, $1,400 on private travel. He knew that wasn't government expenditure. And secondly, deliberately recording something as food when it was in fact alcohol. That's dishonest. I think that deserved a greater sanction. It didn't get a greater sanction. But I am holding my MPs to a very high standard. You don't want to go overboard. I haven't even criticised the level of alcohol consumption by my successors in my foreign affairs or trade portfolio. I know they've got a hard job to do, but it really is incumbent on all of us who are serving or have served as ministers of the Crown that we take proper regard to ensure a reasonable expenditure of public funds. Do you think that the whole way the credit cards the situation is set up needs to be changed? I mean, why do you have to have a credit card that uses taxpayers' funds? Why not have personal credit cards that can then be reimbursed afterwards? Well, I think you're right. I think it's questionable whether ministers individually actually need to have credit cards at all. I scarcely used mine over the 9 years that I had in government, and it's better that you work through your private secretaries. Your private secretaries know the rules. They know what's proper to put on the credit card, what is not proper, what should be repaid if it's personal expenditure. Yeah, Phil, actually tell us. I doubt whether that ministers actually need to have their own credit cards in that respect. Because you're missing from this, generally missing from this list of misplaced funds.
how did you avoid it? Because you were Foreign Affairs Minister for a while there, so you did a lot of travel. How did you avoid using the credit card?
Oh, my colleagues say I was very mean. No, look, I travelled with a private secretary from Foreign Affairs throughout the 9 years of travel, and I travelled extensively, and I've got to say at quite high cost. I mean, there's no cheap way of doing that job on behalf of New Zealand. But, I made pretty much a rule. I might have occasionally used the mini bar. I think I've got a couple of mineral waters and a Morrow bar listed there somewhere. I tried to keep my expenditure down, but I did it through my private secretary, and I relied on my private secretary and then my senior private secretary to run through those records before submitting it to ministerial services to make sure that what was properly on my account should be on my account, and what was on the government's was on the government's. Now, I can't guarantee to you that I never did anything wrong. I simply relied on the efficiency of my staff to make sure that when I was asked to repay something, I repaid it and repaid it promptly, and that's the way to do it. But I always tried to be conscious that when I was travelling abroad, albeit on business, that I was mindful of the taxpayer's dollar that I was spending.
So you're announcing whatever changes you're going to make later on today. If you do demote some of these ministers, are they more or less capable than they were before this expenses scandal broke?
I'd like to think that they would have learned, and in particular Shane would have learned from that experience. Shane's a guy with a huge amount of potential. I think that he's got a lot to offer, both Labour and to New Zealand. I don't see this as the end of his political career, but I see it as an important learning experience, and I'm sure that he will have taken those lessons on board. He in fact, publicly humiliated himself last week. I think he's fronted up, he's taken it on the chin, he's acknowledged what he did wrong, and he's prepared to pay the price for that. I don't think we can ask much more than that of the man.
What about Chris Carter?
Well, I've looked carefully at Chris's list. I mean, at the moment there's something like $250 over 6 years as a minister, and that will all be repaid. It's in fact, I think, been repaid now. I think Chris's problem was that there was a perception that as a non-trade or foreign affairs minister, he travelled rather too frequently and rather too frequently with his party, with his partner. That has brought a price for Chris.
Is that your perception as well?
Yeah, look, I think you have to be careful that that you are seen to use the travel privileges carefully. Most of the travel that he did on government business. It was approved by Cabinet, so the responsibility doesn't simply rest with him. But it has created an impression that he was too ready to travel too frequently with not sufficient regard for frugal use of taxpayers.
So you're not a Chris fan, are you? He's quick.
Chris, no. Get me absolutely right on this. Chris Carter is actually a good friend of mine. He works harder than almost any other member of Parliament that I know. Just this weekend, he's been at 5 ethnic affairs events. While most people were taking a break at the end of their week before they started their new work week, he was out over the whole weekend and working. And it's very easy for us to criticise people, and when you're in politics, you've got to be ready to accept that criticism. You're in the public eye. That's the nature of your job. But we should also sometimes give credit where credit is due for people that are working hard on the part of their community.
The perception also is that he's starting to lose friends. He's losing his supporters. Not only in Labour, but also the public as well.
Well, I think that he's been given a very hard time over his travel, and he carries some responsibility for that. I think that has made the performance of his responsibilities as Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs that much more difficult. In fact, probably close to impossible. And he will pay the price for that. It is a heavy price for Chris. He spent his whole political career wanting to be Foreign Minister of New Zealand, and the risk of losing that portfolio will weigh very heavily on him.
Phil Goff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Wammo. Cheers.
Cheers.
Mate.
The leader of the Labour Party.